सतीश जी और त्रिपाठी जी CMI के सेक्रेटरी ज्वाइन हुए हैं। सतीश
अच्छा, ओ
सतीश लोनीकर है ज्वाइन।
अच्छा, अरे वाह, वेरी गुड। विपिन मैं बाद में बात करता हूँ। वेरी गुड।
पर डॉक्टर साहब आपके बाकी के लोग बाहर के कहाँ हैं? अभी खाली 19 लोग दिख रहे हैं, 17 लोग दिख रहे हैं।
हेलो,
फेसबुक वाले शायद दिखाई नहीं देंगे सतीश ना।
नहीं,
Okay.
लोग 17 लोग ही खाली हैं।
Yes. Speaker has joined.
Doctor Sahib, good evening to all.
गुड आफ्टरनून।
अच्छा, ओके, ठीक है, आ गया तो जी आ गया। We begin. Yeah, I can see Mr. Satyajit.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Welcome on this forum.
आ गया, ठीक है, ठीक।
Thank you for the invitation, sir.
हाँ, we are very pleased to have you with us.
ये बंद कर
My
दो ना।
pleasure.
You can say hello to Mr. Tripathi, our chairman.
You are doing
Good
wonderful
evening.
work. I went through your website also, and I was very happy to see
Thank you, sir.
what that you are doing.
Just doing some simple basic farming.
Dr.
Yes,
Deshpande also is there, whom you have been interacting with.
Yeah. I saw him. Good evening.
And
Deshpande, sir.
we have a core committee members, Mr. Charul Deshpande
Good evening, sir.
and Mr. Ved Jagirdar.
Hello, sir.
Hello. Good evening.
We have Santosh Joshi, who is our vice president as well as core committee member of AMA. Santosh.
Good evening.
हाँ, कोई बात नहीं। We have Bijli madam. Bijli madam, you can say hello to Mr. Satyajit.
Hello, ma'am.
म्यूट पे चलो। ठीक है। Great. You appear to be in your farm right now.
Yeah. I'm in the farm.
Very nice.
It's an old vada that we stay in. It was a 90-year-old house. We kind of got it back in shape, and we're staying out there right now.
90-year-old house, huh? My God.
Yeah.
ये भी देखने लायक चीज होगी।
Yeah, it's an old structure made of wood and stone.
I can see the wooden beams. I can see the
Yeah. There's a wooden ceiling.
The
Yeah.
roof.
the old style built ceiling.
Absolutely.
We used to have in our houses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Mr. Madhav Dhande, he actually is a very good farmer supporter.
Okay.
He's based in Pune. He is a business lead for our seed business.
Okay.
He also is joined us specially. He was very excited to see your profile.
Good evening. Good evening, sir.
Dr. Deshpande, शुरू करना चाहिए।
Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Rare Share, the 66th Rare Share of Aurangabad Management Association. Rare Share is a unique platform which is allowing or which is encouraging the freshers, the upcoming managers to learn excellent management techniques. We have today with us speaker Mr. Satyajit, and he is from Two Brothers Organic Farms. We have also with us President of AMA, Mr. Satish Ji Kagliwal, and our Chairman of AMA, Mr. C.P. Tripathi Sahab, along with Mr. Sunil Deshpande and the entire team members of AMA and the audience. Well, let me welcome you all once again. I will request now Mr. C.P. Tripathi to brief about AMA and Rare Share. Tripathi Sahab, please.
Unmute करो, unmute. हाँ, please.
I also extend a warm welcome to Mr. Hange, and it is a pleasure that we are going to our basics, good farming and good food, good products, natural living is what has kept our culture and society going for thousands of years.
Absolutely.
So welcome to you. And
Thank you, sir.
I welcome all the participants and audience, core committee members. As we all know, that AMA was started in Aurangabad sometimes in 1978, and it has been going through certain cycles. This rare share program was started some time back. It's about more than 2 years, and it has somehow become a very standard program of AMA. Due to this COVID, we got disturbed since, as you know, we all of us are very much used to face-to-face interactions, and digital interaction is something which is a new thing for most of us, and particularly the old timers that we are. So therefore, we were debating how to go about, but enthusiasts amongst us have taken the lead to go digital. So I really appreciate them and I congratulate them for organizing today's rare share digitally. And also, as we see that I have some of our very old associates today being seen on the platform, which otherwise would not be there, who otherwise would not be there. So I welcome them as well. And it is something which is our privilege to start this digital program from a Vada. A speaker is speaking from a Vada, which is more than 90 years old. So let's begin. Over to you, Mr. Jagirdar.
Sir, thank you, sir. And I will take this opportunity to give a formal welcome and a formal introduction of the speaker. And today is about this small program. Mr. Satyajit and Ajinkya are proud farmers and siblings, and they are co-founders of Two Brothers Organic Farms, a 21-acre certified organic farm in Bondani, a small village in Maharashtra in Indapur district. Almost all the products that they make in their 90-year-old farm kitchen are homemade, involving the rural farmer community in their village. Born in Bondani, and they enrolled for the schooling in Bishop School in Pune. Mr. Satyajit graduated in economics from Ferguson College, and he did his MBA in marketing from University of Pune. Mr. Ajinkya is a computer science graduate, and he also did his MBA from Indira College, Pune. They climbed the corporate ladder to work for top MNCs like Citibank, DBS, HDFC, HSBC, etc. Two Brothers Organic Farm ships to more than 18 countries now today from their village. Their products are available for purchase online also and directly from their e-commerce platform. Besides selling online, they also directly sell at farmer markets in Mumbai and Pune. TBOF was rated as India's #1 organic farming brand amongst India and foreign brands in India by Voyage in 2018. Also was rated as the #1 idea that will change Indian agriculture in the year 2019. The brothers also started community not for profit initiative Organic We in Mumbai to help spread the awareness of organic food in urban areas and handhold organic farmers in the rural areas. Now work with over more than 1,000 school students. Sir, once again, welcome to you, and we are very eager to listen to you. Thank you. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for this opportunity to have an interaction with you all esteemed members, and especially people who have had such a brilliant experience throughout their careers. So I think at the end of the session, I'll learn more from you all combined. So a pleasure to talk to you all. There are two formats. I can just go on extempo speaking about the entire journey, or you'll want I can also show a presentation that will give you a visual idea of what we did stage by stage. So tell me what is convenient. I'm happy to do both.
Sir, as you wish, wherever you will be comfortable.
So should I present then, if it's okay with everybody?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I think you'll have to give me the access to present a file from my Zoom.
It will be, sir.
Yeah, I think I can share screen.
Hmm.
I can share screen.
Yeah, I can share screen. Can you view my screen?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
Yeah, it's clear, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what I would tell you is a story of me and Ajinkya and myself, who returned back to our village, our native place, the village that we were born. It's in hinterland Maharashtra, in a small village called Bodhani in Indapur Taluka in Pune district. And this story will then give you insights into the kind of farming we do, the kind of activities that have a social impact, and a business which is intervened in all this. So this is in a story format, and I hope you all enjoy it. So, like the introduction said, we came from an background where we were schooled in Pune. Our father was a farmer. My parents are farmers, and they thought that both of their sons should be educated in Pune and should take up a job and should go to larger cities and go out of India and work and never come back to farming and never come back to the village, because farming in the entire time span of the last 40 years doesn't have any economic gain left, doesn't have any social respect left. So with that idea, they put us in a boarding school at age 3, and we went on to take our education in a boarding school called the Bishop School in Pune. Further on, went to Ferguson College, and then went to the University of Pune to do our MBAs. And then we got, working with banks and a good corporate job as such. And yeah, so that's the background to it. So this is famously what our father always told us. Farming is not a profitable option. You don't study in the city and return to your village to toil in the field. And this was what he told us when we came back, when we decided that no, farming is what we want to do our entire life. Farming is that area that gives us joy. Farming is that area where our passions are involved. And when we came back to farming, we did not have any idea of how we will make a sustenance out of it, how we will make a business out of it. That idea was not there. We just came back to do farming for the love and joy of farming. And this is what I think parents of all farmers' sons normally tell their children when they want to come back to do farming, that farming is not a profitable option. You don't study in the city and come back to your village, to do farming. So the photo just gives you an idea of our corporate career, the attire that we were into. And then later, once we were farmers, this is what we are more comfortable with nowadays. So I'll come back to the personal part. I just want to take you all to a larger sphere, a larger area of influence. So to start with, what is agriculture and how is agriculture majorly happening across the world? It's become industrial agriculture. It is not the agriculture that we see in the textbooks of small children, where they show a small farmer's house and 2 sheep and 2 cows and 2 goats, and it looks like a lovely countryside and he's living his life, very happily. Majority of the world, land-wise, I think more than 70% of the world practices industrial agriculture. And this kind of agriculture means you use, machinery to a very large scale. Their land holdings are large, and due to which you're using a lot of pesticides, insecticides. There are other adverse side effects of this kind of agriculture. Primarily among them is, the bees, the population of bees are declining across the world, and that decline is tremendous. There is loss of biodiversity. Whenever you look at any farm across the world, or even in India nowadays, you will find one type of crop that extends and extends to various hundreds and thousands of acres. Where is that biodiversity gone? Where is the variety of crops that earlier we as agriculturists used to grow? That is kind of being lost at a rapid scale. There is destruction of habitats. There is a lot of migration from rural to urban because farming is not a profitable venture anymore. As I told you, it's chemical-based intensive agriculture and monocropping that is there at large. One of the facts is, 20% of the world's species could be gone in 30 years with this kind of agriculture. What all does it do to our cities, to our water bodies, to our air? And I know you all have, been reading this in newspapers and articles. The reason I want to showcase it again is because it has a connection to farming. All this has a connection to farming. So you have, growing resistance of pests and weeds. You have to use more and more harsher pesticides and weedicides to kill your weeds. Glyphosate is being used widely across farmers in India also today as a weedicide, which is famously called Roundup. There is decreased soil fertility and water retention capability. This year has been absolute amazing year in terms of rainfall. But have we managed to capture all that water is a big question mark. When I mean by capturing and harvesting water, it is not the water that you see in the dams. That is one kind of water harvesting, but that is not the real water harvesting, because that kind of water harvesting exposes water for evaporation losses and the land underneath is lost. You cannot grow anything. The best kind of water harvesting should be fertile soil, which, becomes fluffy and becomes porous, and all the rainwater seeps into the underground and increases the water table from down. Is that kind of water harvesting happening? No, because the kind of farming that is being practiced now, you're killing all the microbiology in soil, due to which soil is becoming more and more compacted, and that's why water doesn't seep inside. There is contamination of groundwater. Any weedicide that a farmer uses, any pesticide that a farmer uses, any fertilizer, nitrogenous fertilizer that a farmer uses, ultimately up to 20-30% of that fertilizer is used by the crop. The remaining gets into the water table and then seeps into our lakes, rivers, water bodies, and there is contamination of groundwater. There is a lot of carbon dioxide emission, which increases global warming on a large scale. And I'll tell you why farming is one of the major causes of global warming, even more than your industries and your vehicles that pollute and contribute to global warming. There is reduced resilience and increased vulnerability to climate change. Last year was a drought in Aurangabad, in my area. Last year was again a drought. This year there's a heavy rainfall. What happened last year to the crops? They couldn't sustain because there was no water. What happened to the crops this year? You look around Aurangabad and speak to farmers, they have lost soybean crops, they have lost cotton crops because, higher rainfall. So the kind of varieties we are growing have a very less resilience to all these climate change factors, and these climate change factors going ahead are going to increase in degree more and more. There is corporate control of seed and land. You all being in the industrial sector must have heard about these large companies like Monsanto and Syngenta, and that is what corporate world is. And I'm not commenting on whether it's good or bad. But now today, if you see the global seed supply chain, close to 70 to 80% of the seeds are controlled by a handful of companies. And that should ring alarm bells, but it is not ringing alarm bells yet amongst governments, because seed is the origin of food, and today it's being controlled by 70 to 80% of all seeds are controlled by a handful of companies. Initially, that was not the case. A farmer used to harvest his own crop. It was desi indigenous varieties of food that he grew. He used to keep some aside as seeds for growing it next year, and there was no cost associated to it. He used to keep the best varieties. He used to do his own seed mapping and his own seed selection. And today, he has to go and buy seeds from the market at a very high cost. So he starts farming like a gamble, where he's already put in a couple of thousand of rupees, and he has to remove that. If not, he will fall into a cycle of debt and will make his life miserable. What is happening to dairy? Where is that farmer image gone? Where is that dairy animal lovely image gone, where a farmer had 4-5 cows and they used to live in coexistence, they used to live symbiotically. The cow gave him something, the farmer gave the cow something. In India, yet you get to see this kind of dairy farming to a very large extent. But even we as a country are changing our dairy landscape rapidly. We are just emulating and copying the Western methods And what happens in the West, when you go to see dairies, they are thousands of cows in one enclosure, and they're tied throughout the day and throughout the night, and they're fed a specific type of feed that only focuses on increasing their meat or increasing the milk production. I just told you about the decline of bees globally, and there are many people who are working in small scales for it. But what Greenpeace says is that if wild pollinator decline continues, we run the risk of losing a substantial portion of the world's flora. And you all must have seen a movie that came out, I think, a couple of years back, where they depicted a scenario that if bees go extinct, how many days would humanity survive? And the results came up saying that within 8 years, there would be no human being alive. If only one, species like bees go extinct, and bees get hampered to a very large scale when you spray any kind of insecticide, weedicide, or pesticide on your crops. Now, coming back to the kind of farming that we do and what is Two Brothers Organic Farms. So I told you a bit about the background of where we came from and how we chose farming. So we were in a city for a very long period. I think for close to 5, 6, 7 years, we were doing a job. And then while doing this job, we got what we wanted in life very fast. We got that designations, and we got to see a couple of countries, and we experienced corporate culture. And in everybody else's eyes, we were successful, or we kind of nailed it, and we were going on the right path. But when we asked this question to ourselves, and ask this simple basic question that are we happy doing what we are doing, increasingly and repeatedly the answer was no. We were not happy doing a corporate job, be it out of Bombay, Delhi, or any other city in the world. And our interest lied in farming, our interest lied in coming back to the village, to be amongst village folk, to be amongst animals, to be amongst growing food. And that's what primarily prompted us to leave a corporate job and come back to farming. So when we came back to farming, my village falls under the Western Maharashtra belt, and you all know Western Maharashtra is famous for sugarcane and the sugar factories that are there in huge density around. And we observed the kind of farming that was happening by our father, and increasingly it was 99% sugarcane or banana that we were growing. So for a year, we just observed what was growing, and we kind of started questioning every method, every crop, every economic activity on the farm. And we found out that, monocropping of sugarcane was leading to a decrease in the soil fertility, was leading to decrease in the water, table, was leading to decrease in the economic activity, because that sugarcane went to a factory. That factory paid you in installments over a year. You didn't get the right value for your produce. And monocropping devastates the soil fertility to a very large extent. So then all these questions arose in our mind. Did we have the solution? It was a no. Did we know the way ahead? It was no. Because I told you about our education backgrounds. We did our education in very different. So we did our education in.
Excuse me, please mute. Someone is talking at the back. Sir, please continue, sir.
Yeah, sorry. So, we observed all this, and did we have a solution? Did we know what to do? The answer was no, because we didn't do a BSc in agriculture. We didn't do any kind of agriculture course. We were sons of farmers, but we were kept away from the farm from age 3 till the time we decided to do farming. So we didn't know anything. So that 1 year we spent in observing what kind of farming was going about. And then we soon realized that we are digging our own grave. We are slowly and slowly moving into an area where there's a no return. Because, our farm co-workers, people who we call uneducated, people who are helping us work on the farm since the last 50, 60 years, they used to come and tell us that, early 40 years back, this same 1 acre of sugarcane produced 80 tons. And now, with the same or increased amounts of fertilizers, we are not getting anything more than 30 tons. And we were wondering that why isn't this thing being noticed by, say my father's generation or by farmers in general, that soil productivity is going down and down, and tomorrow there will be a point of no return. And then what will you do? Do you leave your land and move to a city to do a menial job? Being a son of the soil, being rooted in your village, you remove yourself from that culture, that tradition, and you go and work in a city. And those questions kind of started growing in our head. And we were constantly on the lookout for more sustainable ways of farming, ways by which the land also gave us something and we could give back even more to the land and to the soil and ensure that this land, when we hand over to our next generation, it produces at least twice the amount of productivity with, very little inputs and inputs which are not chemical based. In the meantime, we understood the implications of chemical based farming on the soil fertility. And we decided that we will not, continue this kind of farming and we will resort to organic farming. And what is organic farming? The word might sound fancy. The word might sound, Western, but organic farming is nothing but the farming that our forefathers did 70, 80, 90, 100 years. And before that, the kind of farming that they did was organic farming. It was mainly fertilizers got from the cow, that we call shen khat, in the villages. And that was applied to the farms. And only on the basis of that, they did farming. And for them, there was no loss in productivity. One generation handed over the farm to the next generation. He handed over the farm to the next generations, 10 generations, and there was no loss in productivity. So if you see that history, and if you compare the history after the Green Revolution, especially after the 1960s, where hybrid wheat came out and where nitrogenous fertilizers were advocated and were told to be used by government to farmers, productivity has come down dramatically and drastically over the last 40 years, something that has not happened over the last 500 years. So we just started, joining the dots and looking at how our forefathers grew. And then we realized that, a cow is an intrinsic part of a farm and a farmer's life. And a cow's cow dung and cow urine, when used as a manure, starts fertilizing the soil and starts increasing the fertility of the soil. So this is one of the first activities that we did on the farm, where we got indigenous native variety cows. When you study about cows, you understand that there are many varieties of cows. Primarily among them, which farmers keep, are the Jersey and Holstein cows. But the Jersey and Holstein cows were gotten by, I think, government 40 to 50 years back, only because they had an yield of milk that was very high. But at that point of time, no comprehensive study was done that, a desi cow and its benefits to the soil, to nutrition in its milk. No comprehensive study was done. Now you can see that there's a lot of awareness when you speak about milk, and people are demanding milk from an indigenous native cow, which is now famously called A2 milk, and a Jersey and a Holstein milk is called A1 milk. But the milk apart, why an indigenous cow? Why a desi cow for farming? So one of the very important things is that the cow dung that we take and administer on the soil, in Marathi they say, 5 trolley shenkhat taka, 10 trolley shenkhat taka. It is not the volume that makes a difference. There's a science. The science is that a cow's cow dung contains up to 4.5 crore microbiology. And when I mean microbiology, it has the spectrum of bacteria, fungi, nematode, protozoa, etc. So when this microbiology gets introduced on the soil, this microbiology then goes into the soil and starts multiplying if there is, dried twigs, leaves, and carbonaceous material in the soil. And when their population multiplies, all that they do is they start converting unavailable formats of nutrition to available formats of nutrition, and the tree takes those available formats of nutrition and the tree grows well. It's a simple cycle that you have to establish. So what the cow dung does is it acts like an inoculation, right? Like how we make dahi, how we make curds. We take little curds and put it in milk, and over a time, the bacteria grows, the lactic acid bacilli bacteria grows, and it forms curds out of all the milk. The same thing is done when you take desi cow dung and you put it in soil, and the bacteria multiplies in soil, and that bacteria starts converting the unavailable formats of all the macro and micronutrients to available formats, and that is simply organic farming. So cows are like family to us. When you understand the scientific nature of why that cow is important to your farming, you understand that, and then it starts making sense that why a cow was worshipped in Indian culture and tradition, and why it was given so much importance. Religion aside, there was a lot of scientific value and there was a lot of economic benefit of a cow being in a farmer's family. That is, the first part of organic farming. And I will today try covering the basic 4 parts of organic farming. The second part is mulching. Mulching simply means, covering the soil with organic waste, covering the soil with all the twigs, all the branches, all the leaves, everything that comes out from the farm except the fruit, except the grain. So a farmer has to take the grain and the fruit, and everything has to be returned back to the soil. And that is carbon. And that carbon is fed upon by all this microbiology, which comes, by the cow dung. And this carbon is so underestimated by farmers that you have farmers burning farm waste after their produce has been harvested. And you all know that in Delhi, especially after wheat is harvested, farmers in Punjab and Haryana burn their farm waste, and it causes, flights to be disrupted in the national capital for 2 to 3 days, because all that pollution just clouds the airports and the skies around, and planes cannot land. And imagine, this is carbon which needs to go back to the soil. This is gold which needs to go back to the soil. And the farmer does not know the importance of this. The farmer thinks that if he burns it and if he makes his land spick and span, swachha, that is the best kind of farm he has. But he forgets it that he's torching his farm, he's burning his farm every year after every crop. You all must have seen bricks, right? What is brick? A brick is nothing but mud. Mud that plants grew, mud that life existed. But that mud was taken, it was put in a form, and that mud was burnt. That mud was baked, and that made it a brick. So imagine you are burning your farm waste every year, and you are slowly turning your soil lifeless. You're killing the microbiology, and you're burning carbon that is so important for the farm. What else does mulching help you in? And you all come from a zone that is arid, that is drought prone, Aurangabad, Marathwada. There are water shortages. Out of the 20 years, at least 16 years, there is water shortages. You have only, I think, 3 or 4 years of good rainfall in the last 20 years. And when farmers have little water, and when they start, doing agriculture with that little water, they forget that close to 60 to 70% of that water gets evaporated by the sun, gets evaporated by the wind. So you just need to do mulching, and you need to administer water through your drip irrigation or through your traditional agricultural practices under the mulch. Simply mulching helps you save close to 90% of the water evaporation. So mulching also helps you in reducing water evaporation. This is again and creative that tells you, how much percent of water evaporates with a mulch and how much percent of water evaporates without a mulch. So it's clear that 80% of water evaporates when there is no mulch, and only 10% of water evaporates when there is a mulch, apart from the other benefits that mulch increases soil fertility, and mulch is food for all the microorganisms. This is our rail farm photo. I hope everybody can see that farm photo, right?
Yes,
so
sir.
This is a rail farm photo, and you can clearly see the left-hand side is the farm that we farm on. The right-hand side is my neighbor's farm. He's a grape farmer, and there is no difference in the type of soil. It is stuck to each other. There is only a band. There is only a 2 feet gap in between my farm and his farm. And every year in June, we have 1 or 2 heavy rainfalls. This year was a record. This year, rain broke all records. We had close to, I think, 1400 to 1500 mm of rainfall in the last 4-5 months. And believe me, we document everything on the farm that happens after rainfall. And, magical difference takes place. In our farm, within 20-25 minutes, all the water gets drained into the soil. it doesn't drain out of the farm. Okay, I'm saying it drains into the soil. It doesn't drain out of the farm. And that is because the soil has become porous. That is because the soil has become fertile. Because of all the microorganisms which I just mentioned, your bacteria, fungi, nematode, protozoa, all these are increased and they're teeming in numbers. And earthworms are many. On the right-hand side, you see a farmer who practices chemical-based farming. He's always putting his tractor inside for spraying his grapes or his orchards. So what happens over a period of time is that the acidic fertilizers that he's using and the tractor that he's using ensures that microbiology in his soil starts dying. And when microbiology in the soil starts dying, your soil particle size starts decreasing and your soil becomes more and more compact. And after a certain point, the soil at the bottom becomes a hard pan. And when it is a hard pan, water can no longer percolate inside. When it is a hard pan, water can no longer percolate inside. So this is a case study that we have at our farm. This is the bees that we keep act as pollinators on the farm. The third practice of organic farming is growing border trees. So we all stay in houses, and houses have 4 walls, and those walls protect us from wind, rain, sun, etc. You know, when a farm doesn't have any kind of trees on the border, what happens is that
Disconnect हो गए.
I think it got disconnected for a while.
Yeah. Please continue.
Yeah, I'll just put on the presentation. Yeah, is it visible now?
Not yet.
Is it visible?
Not yet.
Fine. Let me know when it's visible. I'll start there.
No, it's still
Is
not
it visible
visible,
now?
sir. No, it's still not visible, sir.
Okay, one sec. Just is it visible now?
It is still in process.
Yeah, I'll just come and read. Is it visible now?
No. Not an issue. Even if the PPT won't work, you can go ahead and you can speak.
Yeah, so one of the fundamental other principles of farming, organic farming, is growing trees on the border. And when you grow trees on the border, they act like a wall that prevents air from flowing and which reduces water evaporation losses. And also it ensures that the carbon dioxide that is released by all the mulching stays in the farm and your trees have better photosynthesis. One sec. Yeah. So that is the third principle of organic farming. The fourth principle is to grow a food forest. You know, what is a food forest? And I was telling you all that, you know, monocropping is what we see across farms, across the world with farmers. And monocropping is when you grow only one kind of crop over a large expanse of land. And a food forest is exactly opposite of monocropping. And if you can see the photo, can you see the presentation now?
Yes.
Yeah. So by food forest, what I mean is that we grow a mixed a cropping model where we grow a variety of fruits and vegetables, and right now we have around 20 varieties of fruits that grow in the farm, and these are all on one plot. We don't grow one crop over an expanse of land. So that ensures that biodiversity is there. That ensures that the kind of fertilization that happens is holistic. The kind of pest management that happens is integrated, and the kind of fruits we get. We don't get one variety of fruit in a large quantity. We get a large variety of fruit in small quantities, which is even easier for the marketing part. So these are some of the fruits that we grow. Another thing that I would like to add is that any kind of crop that we are growing, be it a fruit, vegetable, creeper, lentil, legume, grain, everything is of the native indigenous variety. We do not grow any variety that is modified, that is genetically modified, that is hybrid, that is new. And the reason is because a native variety has sustained over 5,000, 6,000, or sometimes 10,000 years of evolution, and it is best suited for any kind of pest attack and for any kind of droughts. Now, just to put some numbers in perspective, we did a rough calculation of the carbon dioxide that we sequester in our farms. And for your information, when I mentioned global warming in the starting, and I told you how farming is one of the largest contributors to global warming, when you till your land repeatedly again and again, you are releasing more and more carbon dioxide into the soil, which causes the climate to heat up and which causes global warming to increase. When you burn farm waste, the same thing you are doing. But when you practice organic farming, you are growing perennials to a very large extent. You are not growing annuals. And what perennials do is that they end up harvesting more and more carbon dioxide into the ground, converting carbon dioxide into sugars and other food material that they need, which they store under the ground. So one of the very well globally recognized solutions to global warming is to shift to organic farming and to food forests, so that you can reduce the amount of parts per million, the amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and get it down. So organic farming is one of those effective ways which you can even tackle global warming. And in our own farm over the last 7 years, we have managed to harvest and sequester close to 70,000 tons of carbon dioxide. So that's a bit about the farming part. Coming back to our team, with whom we farm, and these are some of the people who are an integral part of our team. And if you see, most of them are in modern day, they're uneducated, they're illiterate. But according to us, they're highly educated, because these are the guys and these are the women who changed their pattern of farming for us. They believed in the theory that we were doing research in, and they help us in our day-to-day farming activities. These are the kind of people that have joined us at the front end, and everybody has a story to how they got in touch with us and how they joined us, starting from Akash and Preetham, who are farmers' sons, did their BSc Agri, and they were following us on Facebook and Instagram, and they loved what we were doing being farmers' sons. And they came up to us and told us that they want to join us. And today Preetham handles the warehouse and logistics, and Akash handles the vendor relations. There is Divya, who was working in a corporate sector with a healthcare based company for over 8 years, and she was not liking what she was doing, because she believed in holistic living and holistic medicine and holistic nutrition. That's when she came up to us and told us that she wants to join. And we couldn't afford a person like her, because she was very well qualified, very well experienced, and yet she insisted, and she joined at 1/3 of her remuneration that she was getting in the market. Lately, we have Aditi, who's joined us as head of operations and strategy. And Aditi was in the US. She was working in New York for around 8 years, with the consulting firm PricewaterhouseCoopers. work in a social impact sector, and she got talking to us. Ultimately, she left New York and she's come back to India, and she's joined us and helping us set up the operations and strategy around what we do. Like the introduction rightly mentioned, we were just doing what we did, and there are many aspects to it which I will skip because of the constraints of time that we have. But ultimately, doing what we do without any fancy stuff, we were rated as India's #1 organic farming brand by Vogue in 2018 amongst Indian and imported farming brands in India. We were also rated as the #1 idea that will change farming and the face of agriculture in India by the Better India in 2018. So this is a peek into the kind of products we make. All the products that we make come out from the farm or the farmers whom we work with and farmers who grow food organically. And every product is made without any additive, any preservative, any binder, any filler, no external stuff except pure food. So we have ghee, there is peanut butter, there is attas. We use traditional techniques like grinding, stone grinding, wood pressing, and stuff. On the
Sir, you
front
are not
side,
properly
we
audible,
have a
sir. Sir, you are not audible, sir.
collaboration with many people, at the front end, and whom we feel, can have a large impact. I'll have to step out this. Yeah, I'm just now.
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah, I'm sorry. On the farm, there is limited connectivity.
Yeah,
So let me know when I go out of range. Am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So at the front end, we have, influencers, and we have people who decide, trends. Like, you would have never had a broccoli 30 years back, but somebody in a 5-star hotel got this exotic vegetable called a broccoli and made something with it. And then people wanted to have that same dish in their houses. And now farmers in India, in Maharashtra, are growing broccoli. And broccoli is not well suited to our geography, to our soils, and it doesn't have the amount of nutrition that our native indigenous species have. But why? Because that chef at the top, that nutritionist at the top, bought it and made it a fashion. So we are making use of the same ladder, but we are telling these guys to start promoting, and we are creating festivals around, native indigenous foods. So prominent amongst them, there is Nisa Homi, who is a YouTuber who has around 1 million followers. There are Ayurvedic doctors. These are all the nutritionists and influencers and, zero waste people that we work along with. These are our retail partners in Bombay. We never went about looking for shops in Bombay, but passionate people who run shops that, house organic farming produce came up to us, and we work very closely with all of them. And everybody has a story of how they got associated to the work we are doing. There are, chefs like Pratik Sadhu in Bombay, who runs a very high-end restaurant like Mask. There is the Bombay canteen run by Thomas Zakaris, who's a very famous chef, rated #1 chef by Condé Nast. And we are working with them, to get trends around eating native indigenous food and organic food. There is a nutritionist, Luke Cotino, who you work with very closely. And together we are increasing awareness around nutrition and how, good food, chemical-free food can just be medicine for you all. So this is a timeline of, how we progressed. We started off with the farmers markets in Bandra, and we yet do those markets. So as I speak to you after this call, I'll be packing up my farm truck and leaving for Bombay to do the farmers markets on the weekends in Bombay. And that's something we have loved doing from the start, because you get an opportunity to meet people and speak to them and tell them, how good fruit should be grown, how it is grown, and how their choice affects what a farmer does in his soil. So in year 3, I think we just formed Organic We with like-minded individuals, and we help many farmers and work with many schools. We have the Organic Farming Club established in the Bishop School. We have an Organic Farming Club established in Polymath International School. And I think just last week, we had a lecture where we spoke to the principal and the students of Stepping Stones High School based in Aurangabad. And we had a 1-hour session with the students, and the principal has committed to opening an organic farming club in his school in Aurangabad. And we will come over and help the school transform their landscape to growing, plants that give you food, not plants that have aesthetic value. A lot many plants in front of offices and factories and in schools and community institutions give you no fruit. They give you only aesthetic value. But we are, convincing all these people to grow food on the school campus and grow it by students. Let the students work in soil. Let them work with a khurpa, kudar, khora, party, tikau instead of a digital pen and an iPad, which also is important. But I think, and that also students enjoy a lot out of our experience of working with these schools. Going forward, we just converted our small proprietorship to a private limited company in January, and we got a very good valuation for what we were doing. Many investors expressed interest, but before we invited any investor or anything, we got together all the people on the farm who had helped us from day one, right from our driver to the guy who boils the milk to the lady who works on the farm. We got them and we gave them a stake in the company, since we're a private limited now, and we presented them with, I think, close to a million rupees of shares each co-worker, and we have made them owners of this company right now. These are some of the community institutions that we have, and all these community institutions, it means speaking to colleges, schools, farmers, and various other things. We do not charge any fee for this, because this is something that we consider as our duty to share our learnings with people who have an interest in it. These are some of the institutions that we work very closely. There's the Bhumi College in Bangalore. There's the Bishop School in Pune. There's Polymath in Bombay. Then just last year in December, IIM Ahmedabad invited the both of us to come and speak to their students. And I think it was a 1.5-hour lecture, which extended to around 3 hours. And 4 students from IIM Ahmedabad expressed interest to come and work with us in the startup that we have started in farming, and which kind of gave us a jolt in our arms, because we understood that even talent that is numero uno in the country, that is the best in the country, when you strike the right conscience in them, they're willing to leave aside fat paychecks and fancy careers and come and work in a sector that causes real social impact from ground up. These are other institutions. There is Jesus and Mary College in Delhi that we work with. This is Thomas Zakaris. He's a chef. He's a chef which I think close to 1 lakh people follow on Instagram. He's the kind of a guy who dictates what people should eat. He runs the Bombay Canteen, a very famous restaurant in Lower Parel. We work with him closely to hold festivals around native indigenous food and to talk and make this a highlight. While we were doing this, we got a lot many visitors across India, across the world. We have, I think, spoken to and kind of semi-trained over 8,000 to 9,000 farmers across India. And not only India, we have got visitors from across the world. We have had around, this is an old slide, but we have had people from over 14 countries who have come, stayed with us, worked on the farm, helped us sell in farmers markets, contributed to, in some of the other format from their area of expertise. So there are many upcoming initiatives that we are planning and we're looking at. Primarily amongst them is now to put up a proper structure, because all this was done from a farm kitchen and a 90-year-old Vada. Now we have planned to build a shell which will be 100% solar powered, which will harvest 100% of the water we need throughout the year. So just one of the projects that we're looking at. So all in all, I think I've managed to keep the time of 1 hour. Thank you for this, and we're open for questions. Thank you a lot. I'm done.
Thank you very much. It's a wonderful session insight you have given. We got it from you. Excellent. We have a couple of questions in the.
I've lost you. You're not audible, sir. Hello. Yeah, I couldn't hear you.
Hello.
Yes, yes.
Let me read out a question that has come because Ved Jagirdar is not audible. There may be some issues with his network. There is a question that how does organic farming address growing demand due to rise in world population? Your
Okay.
views on farming of exotic vegetables and fruits
I didn't get the last part. What did you say before exotic?
and fruits.
So can you read that last sentence?
What? There are two questions.
Yeah, I know. I got the first question. What is the second question?
Your views on farming of exotic vegetables
Okay, okay. I got it. I got it. Okay. So
in
I'll
India.
start with this first question. It's a very apt question. We get this question a lot many times that how will organic farming feed the millions of mouths, that are there in India and across the world? And with the growing population, how will it cater to it? Because there is this I would say, right conception that organic farming productivity is less. If in chemical farming you're getting 100 units, in organic farming you might get 60 units, and that is a fact. Don't go to expect a very high productivity in organic farming. Realistically, you will get 60-70% of what you're doing in a chemical-based farming. Now, to give you a perspective and a scenario, and I have that in my presentation. If you see NASA's map of the world, and there's a map by FAO which tells you how many, how much percentage of the world grows food, and how much percentage of the world grows, feed for animals and fuel, especially fuel like your palm oil and stuff. So it is startling to note that close to 70 to 75% of the world's farmers do not grow food. And by food I mean your lentil, legumes, pulses, vegetables, and fruits. So what are these farmers growing? They are growing commodities that are traded globally, and commodities. I'm in the dark, so I don't know if you can see me. There was a request to start my video. Okay, so what are farmers across the world growing then? So these farmers, these 70% of farmers are growing commodities, and commodities is your maize, is your canola, is your palm, and these commodities are not eaten by humans per se. They are used for animal feed, or they're used as fuel. So all I am saying is that if 30% of the world's agricultural land is being able to give you real food, even if you increase that 30% to a 50%, and 50% of farmers across the world grow real food and not commodities, and they grow your lentil, legume, pulses, grains, vegetables, and fruits, you will have enough food. And all this grown organically also, you will have enough food to feed the billions of mouths.
Sir, I have one question.
Yeah.
See, if you can, it will be very interesting for us to know if you can narrate one incident wherein a young generation with a digitalization, you find that it's really a need of time now. Has it happened with you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. You mean new age technologies and digitalization and why it is important, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I think when I say traditional means of farming, I do not mean, keeping aside any new invention. We use technology to a very large extent. Okay. And I'll tell you how it has benefited us. We use technology in the mechanical parts of things. So in farming, you need irrigation, and we use drip irrigation. And we use drip irrigation by Netafim, which is an Israeli drip irrigation company. And then they have a system which can be operated from your mobile phone. You can switch on your motor, you can switch on the drip irrigation. So that is technology that you are using without using chemicals or any other things. That is one part. That is the growing part. Now in the selling part, technology enables you to bypass all the old steps and methods and procedures and layers of selling. So traditionally I would have had to go to a wholesaler, then give my products to a wholesaler, then literally beg him to keep it, give him a high margin, then go to a retailer, and then sustain all that, and then follow him up for money and all that. But today's times, and the classic cases are also the first time we thought of selling online, because everybody is going online. You just go to Google and you find out solutions for plug and play e-commerce shops. You'll get many that do not require a huge expense. So we set up our e-commerce shop from scratch with a very, very little budget, a budget that will be your monthly grocery spend. And we had our online shop running. Now, with the help of technology, we got an e-commerce shop. With the help of e-commerce shop, we started getting customers across India because we could reach to them directly. With the help of technology, we opened a YouTube channel, which is free of cost. We recorded our videos on the kind of farming, uploaded them free of cost. We opened a Facebook page. We opened up an Instagram page. We started connecting to the end consumer, talking about the kind of farming we're doing, sharing our farm life experiences, making them customers out of, followers, and selling to them. And today, through the use of technology, we have managed to send our products to 34 different countries, to I think 664 cities across the world. So that is the classic case of using technology. Yeah.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. There is one more question in the chat box, which is from Mr. Charu, our colleague. And he has asked the question, what is your take on for decreasing cultivable land? Shall I repeat?
Yeah.
Okay.
I got it. So
Okay, fantastic.
my take is that why is that land not why is it becoming a non-cultivable land? It is only because people are using chemical-based fertilizers to such an extent that the land has become a salt pan, that the land has become infertile. So that is the kind of farming we are doing exactly propagates soil fertility, increase in soil fertility. So if you do organic farming, if you do mixed cropping and stuff, you will in fact turn salt pans to regular farms and soil.
Satyajit, I have one question.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes.
Little bit louder, sir.
Yes. So, in fact, now we will talk about India having a population of 130 crores.
Yes.
And our agriculture basically is growing the human needs mostly. Worldwide, maybe they are going for the palm or other things, but in India, mostly the people, they are growing the human needs, roti, kapda, makan.
Okay, I have an objection to this. But
One thing. For the survival of 130 crores of the population, really we need the food. And second thing, we should have some reserve foods also, because sometimes famine comes or something like that. We cannot forget about it. So right now, to incorporate the concept of 100% organic farming, it's okay. Very few of them will adopt it. It looks very nice. Your produce going to 13 countries is okay. But suppose we think of the country to introduce this concept as a user-friendly. Can we have an integrated approach initially for 4 or 5 years and then the organic farming?
Okay, so there are two aspects to your question. One is you are saying India and farmers in India are mainly growing food. They're not growing what I was talking, commodities. But just for your information, that is the perspective that you have, but it's not the case. If you see Maharashtra and if you see Western Maharashtra, I think close to 80% of the farmers, they are growing sugarcane. But tell me, is sugarcane food? Sugarcane goes to make sugar. It goes in various chocolates and it goes in various confectionaries, majority of it. That is not real food. So even if you convert the area under sugarcane cultivation to growing real food, you will have ample of food for Maharashtra. Okay. Now
I will quote one small example. In India, the sugarcane is being cultivated only on 12 lakh hectares, whereas the paddy is being grown on 43 million lakh hectares.
Yes.
Sugarcane is also a part of food. It's a source of energy. Per capita consumption of sugar in India I think it is not less than 25 grams a day.
Agree with you. So,
Yes. So that also become a part of the food.
Yeah, I agree with you on that.
Yes.
Not an issue. All I'm saying.
Only thing is that what I'm saying is to convince the farmer to go for this organic farming 100%. They find it difficult or they are scared of it.
Should.
So
Yeah,
can we have a gradual approach by way of integrated way of reaching to the organic farming?
Absolutely. The transition has to be integrated. You cannot, because there is economics involved in it. If I tell 10 farmers go organic, and if there is a loss in productivity and the market that I get for their produce is not at the right price, then what do? So there has to be a system around it. There has to be some organization around it. There has to be a gradual transfer from what he is doing right now to the ideal scenario. And we never advocate with any farmer to go 100% immediately first year all land organic. If you have 10 acres, remove aside 3 acres. And in those 3 acres go organic. And when you have managed to develop a market for those 3 acres, then take the next 3 acres. So it is always a gradual transition. It is always a gradual transition.
Satyajit, what I feel the need of the country is the people like you are very few, but you are the role model or success. So people can listen to you. So we should have some communication system, maybe some education systems, how to go for the integrated farming. That is integration, रासायनिक शेती आणि सेंद्रिय शेती याचा सुवर्ण मध्य कसा साधावा. Because you are the leader. In India, there is a problem. Who will bail the cat? Who will take the leadership? I think Satyajit is the right person. Your success itself is telling that you are the right person. You are the authority. So why not to take some part and some organization gets associated towards the integrated farming initially for 5 years and then convert it into the organic farming.
Absolutely. So we are doing it in our own little way. I have limited resources.
So do you have any plan? Because now you are having so many stakeholders, approaches, investors, your own infrastructure. So can you think out of that? Because this is the need of the hour.
Absolutely. Yes. So we have plans.
Because if you have a plan, the people like us can join you voluntarily.
Yes. So one thing that farmers get motivated by is economics. We have observed that only 1% of farmers have an innate proactiveness where they will switch to organic because of the spiritual aspect or because it's good for the soil. That's only 1%. 99% of the farmers will switch to any new kind of farming only because of the economics involved in it.
See, what happened, what happened over a period of time because of the parting of the families, the land holding per person, per family is getting reduced, whereas the cost of living has gone high. Thus, he is struggling for the productivity, higher productivity.
Okay. Let me just.
And that is the reason that he has to go all these things.
Yes.
I will tell you.
No, I want to hold you on this.
Land needs to be digged out. Land needs to be opened. But we are cutting the lands with these weapons like tractors and other things.
So let me just hold you on this one little thing, okay? We'll just keep this aside for 2 minutes. And I'll take you to another country, okay? There's a country called Bali. I think you all must have heard about it.
Yes.
Okay. Now, Bali is a country that is gifted by natural resources in the sense that, there are wonderful beaches and oceans and, hills and forests, and it is splendid. Okay. Now, if Bali had thought that, let's start converting these resources into some kind of industrial produce or some kind of, processing and stuff and put up factories, that would have been one way Bali would have grown. But what did Bali choose? Bali just chose that let us, start marketing what we have given, what nature has given to us, and let's have tourism as our main focus. And today, 80% of the economy of Bali functions on tourism. And Bali, a small country, might be not even the size of Pune district. It might be even
Yes.
smaller than Pune district.
Yes.
It has many more number of 5-star hotels than entire India has.
Correct.
And the employment around tourism is very high. The per capita income is higher than India. The lifestyle is good, people are happy, and everything is well. Now, they have used something that was naturally given to them as an advantage. Now, I'll come back to your question where you said that, and you're right, that land holding in India and in India, farmer families is dwindling and is becoming small and small. Okay. Now, that is a challenge that we have. Now, what if we can, turn this challenge on its head and make it an advantage? Now, for organic farming, you require many hands to work. You require less machinery. For organic farming, you require a mixed cropping kind of a model. Now, the Western world, especially America or Europe, they have large farm sizes. Can they do organic farming? Very difficult, because they don't have hands. They have machineries. They can't do mixed cropping patterns. They can't do native seeds. So they are modeled for chemical based industrial farming. They are not born for
Mr.
organic farming.
Mr.
Now,
Sat-
if India,
Mr.
now if
Satyajit,
farmers, yeah,
sorry, I'm interrupting you, but there is one more, quite a similar question. Not so much similar, but there is one question that and that has been asked from a viewer, Miss Isha Galgali, and she asked you, can a small land of 12 acres becoming economically viable with organic farming?
100%, it can become viable with organic farming. 12 acres is a very large landscape to do many other activities. And coming back to my question, I wanted to complete the last part where Sir had asked that, how will small land holding in India, which is a disadvantage right now, I am saying let's look at it as an advantage. Why doesn't India become the capital of organic farming for the world? Today, everybody in the world requires organic produce. Is there ample amount of supply? No, because European countries and especially America is not modeled for organic farming. India is modeled for organic farming. You have small land sizes. You have many people who are based out of farming. You can give them organic seeds, native seeds, organic inputs, have organic produce certified, and you can supply to the entire world. So what are you doing basically? You're increasing your exports. You're supplying something that doesn't need to be mined for, burned for, or exploited for. You are increasing the fertility of your soil. You are increasing the water holding capacity. You are increasing the biodiversity. You are increasing nutrition in the food that you are exporting and you are consuming. So a potential disadvantage can be turned on its head as an advantage.
Mr.
Very
Satyajit,
correct,
there is
Satyajit. Very
Mr. Satyajit, there is one more question for you. And Mr. Keyur Patidar, he is asking you a question. Can we get a training or a detailed visit at your facility?
Yeah, we are open for visitors. One-day visits right now are open. Since we do farming, selling, and the business around it, most of our time is all over the place. But yes, we are open for showing people around and showing them how we do it.
Excellent. There is one more very interesting question just came up, and it is stating Mr. Raghuvir Pandit, and he is asking a question for you that formal agriculture education would have been more helpful in your enterprises, or passion is more important?
Passion is any day more important. It is passion. It is nothing else. I mean, education helps, education supports, but if you have passion, you will go to the source and take it. Education is never given. The principle of education, it is always taken. So passion is important.
Okay, Acha, I have one question. Now this question is from me. I am taking this privilege to ask you a question about it. Suppose there is a farmer and he's having say around 4 to 5 acres of a land, and he's a traditional farmer. Now, what will be your, let's say, advice or guidance to him? Because it seems, so if I will summarize it from tradition, you came up with the technology with digitalization and you are adopted whatever the sources you were able to adopt to use your agriculture product reach to everyone. Now, this guy who is having 4 to 5 acres of land and he is a traditional, what will be your advice to him?
See, you have to work with the resources you are allocated. What you have has to be your utensils and your tools. You cannot expect an ideal situation. So in my case, because we were given that kind of challenges, we worked around it. Now, for a farmer who has 4 to 5 acres of land, he can then form a cooperative kind of thing with other like-minded farmers in and around his area, and then club in 40, 50 acres of farms. One guy can take the responsibility of marketing, and a couple of others can, do the farming. And this is how, like, you have the farmer producer organizations who do marketing of chemically produced food, and they are successful. I am saying put up an FPO for marketing organically produced food. And one amongst those is always an engineer who's come back to the village, is always a BA guy who's come back to the village. He can open up a page on Facebook, get in touch with consumers, go approach societies, show them the practices, show them the lab reports, and create a consumer base around it. Have the consumers come to the farm, know your farmer type things. So there's a lot that can be done. If you alone are too small for it, you form a kind of an association with like-minded people and you take this ahead.
Excellent. And now I'm taking the last question. And this question is from Mr. Ravi Gyan Prakash Chaudhary, and he is asking you a question. Do you have any training program on organic farming for those who want to do organic farming professionally?
We don't have any formal training. I told you we are putting up our entire thing in bits and pieces, but we have plans to put up formal training because the requirement is huge and there is no formal training place for organic farming courses. Even the BSc agriculture course maximum tells you about organic farming for 2 or 3 weeks in their syllabus. So we are trying to put up something. It will take us quite some time, but it will take us, I think, 2 to 3 years to put up something.
Okay, super, excellent. Thank you very much. And I am straightway moving for the formal vote of thanks for the 66th rare share of Aurangabad Management Association. Mr. Satyajit, thank you very much. For us, those who are falling in corporate, is totally a different learning for us today. It's really a rare share, I will say. I am extremely thankful to you for guiding us. I am also thankful to our chairman, Mr. C.P. Tripathi Saab, our president, Mr. Kagliwal Saab, Dr. Sunil Deshpande Saab. We have also an excellent special team for IT from Mr. Falke, Mr. Joshi, Mr. Chudiwal. And needless to say, I am thankful to the entire audience here. It's a wonderful evening. Thank you very much. And I'm wishing you a nice time and good night to all. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. It was a pleasure to share this with you all.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you
sir.
very much. Bye.
Welcome.